We live in an age where information is at our fingertips, where the voices of millions are amplified by the power of social media and instant communication. We are more connected than ever before, yet in many ways we are also more divided. This paradox is at the heart of a psychological phenomenon that has existed throughout history, one that we are all susceptible to in ways we often fail to recognize: mass formation psychosis. It's a term that may sound unfamiliar, but it explains a disturbing truth. The crowd is dangerous, not because of the individuals in it, but because of the collective psychology that binds them together. Mass formation psychosis occurs when a large group of people is swept up in a shared emotional state, typically driven by fear, uncertainty, or a deep sense of loss. This psychological state overrides the critical thinking of individuals, allowing them to become part of something greater than themselves, often at the cost of rational thought and moral judgment. But how does this happen? Why do individuals give up their autonomy and submit to the collective? And perhaps most importantly, what does this mean for our societies today? To understand this, we must begin by delving into the nature of the crowd itself. The crowd, at its core, is not just a collection of individuals. It is a psychological entity in its own right, a living, breathing organism that can exert influence over its members. There is an undeniable power in numbers, a collective energy that sweeps through the group and forces individuals to act as part of a whole. But in this mass of humanity, individuality often fades away. People become anonymous, less accountable for their actions, and more susceptible to the influence of the group. The crowd operates not on reason, but on emotion. It is driven by fear, anger, joy, or excitement, and these emotions spread like wildfire, infecting each individual until the entire group becomes a single entity, a collective mind. In such a state, critical thinking is suspended. The crowd is not concerned with logic or reason. It is concerned with the emotional charge of the moment, and in this emotional rush, the individual is lost. The individual becomes part of something greater, but also something more dangerous. This is the essence of mass formation psychosis. But what triggers this shift? How does the individual become swept up in the tide of the collective? And why do they often fail to question the reality they are being presented with? The answer lies in fear and uncertainty. Fear is a primal emotion, deeply embedded in our evolutionary makeup. It is the emotion that alerts us to danger, the emotion that motivates us to protect ourselves. But when fear is not just an individual experience, but a collective one, it has the potential to overwhelm reason and lead to collective hysteria. When a society is in crisis, whether through economic collapse, political instability, or even a global pandemic, fear becomes pervasive. It seeps into every corner of life, infecting the collective consciousness. In these moments, people feel vulnerable, lost, and uncertain about the future. It is in these moments of fear and uncertainty that mass formation psychosis can take hold. When the individual is overwhelmed by fear, they seek safety, they seek certainty, and in the absence of real solutions, they turn to the collective for comfort. The crowd offers a sense of security, a belief that by joining together, they can overcome the fear that plagues them. But this sense of security is illusory. The crowd may promise safety, but it delivers only submission to the collective will, and in doing so, it strips away the autonomy of the individual. The manipulation of fear is a powerful tool in mass formation psychosis. Political leaders, media outlets, and social influencers understand this power well. By amplifying the fear and uncertainty that pervade society, they create a fertile ground for mass psychosis to take root. In times of crisis, these powerful forces offer solutions that often involve a scapegoat, an enemy, or a cause to rally behind. The crowd, in its desperate need for meaning and security, embraces these solutions without question. The individual becomes part of the collective, and in doing so, they lose their ability to think critically or independently. But this is not a new phenomenon. Throughout history, we can see the effects of mass formation psychosis in the rise of totalitarian regimes, in the spread of mass hysteria, and in the darkest moments of human history. Take, for example, the rise of Nazi Germany. In the 1930s, Germany was a nation in turmoil. The aftermath of World War I, the Treaty of Versailles, and the economic devastation of the Great Depression left the country vulnerable to radical ideas. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party capitalized on this fear and uncertainty. They presented a solution, a narrative that promised to restore Germany to greatness. They painted a picture of a world where the enemy was clear and the path to salvation was simple. Submit to the collective, follow the party, and the nation would be saved. In the midst of this chaos, millions of people were swept up in the fervor of the movement. The individual was lost in the crowd, absorbed by the collective will. The fear of the unknown, of economic collapse, of losing national identity, was used to justify actions that, in hindsight, seem unthinkable. The crowd was manipulated into believing that their only hope lay in the submission to a common cause, a cause that ultimately led to the deaths of millions and the destruction of an entire generation. This is the power of mass formation psychosis. It can twist the minds of ordinary people, turning them into instruments of destruction, all in the name of a collective ideal. But it is not just the events of history that demonstrate this danger. It is happening today, in subtle and not so subtle ways. In our modern world, mass formation psychosis is amplified by technology. The internet, social media, and 24-hour news cycles create an environment where fear and uncertainty can spread faster than ever before. The algorithms that drive our social media feeds thrive on outrage, fear, and division. They amplify the voices that stoke anxiety, creating echo chambers that isolate individuals and feed them the same narratives over and over again. In these digital spaces, the crowd mentality is no longer confined to the streets or the town square. It exists in every corner of the internet, in every comment section, in every viral video. The same psychological forces that once fueled the rise of fascism now fuel the rise of online mobs, cancel culture, and divisive political movements. The crowd, once an anonymous entity, is now a digital force that can reach millions in an instant. This digital age has made it easier than ever for individuals to be swept up in mass psychosis. The rapid spread of misinformation, the polarization of opinions, and the constant bombardment of sensationalized news create an environment where the individual is constantly reacting, constantly fearful, and constantly vulnerable to manipulation. But even in this world of digital chaos, there is hope. The first step in protecting ourselves from the dangers of mass formation psychosis is awareness. We must recognize the power of the crowd, the psychological forces that drive collective behavior, and the dangers they pose. We must be vigilant, questioning the narratives we are presented with, and resisting the pull of the collective mind. Critical thinking is our greatest defense. In a world that thrives on division and fear, we must cultivate the ability to think independently, to question our own beliefs, and to engage in thoughtful discourse. We must reclaim our individual autonomy and resist the pressure to conform to the group. The crowd is dangerous, not because of the people in it, but because of the collective psychology that binds them together. The moment we lose sight of our individuality, the moment we stop questioning, is the moment we become part of the herd. And when that happens, the consequences can be catastrophic. So, the next time you find yourself swept up in the frenzy of a crowd, whether it's online or in person, ask yourself, am I thinking for myself? Or am I just another face in the crowd? In a world where mass formation psychosis is a constant threat, it is our responsibility to protect our minds and our souls from the collective madness. Because the crowd is dangerous, not just because of its size, but because it can make us forget who we are. And when we forget who we are, we become lost. Lost in the mass, lost in the chaos, lost in the psychosis.